Hi, it's Professor Davis. This is your topics checklist for sections 4.4, 4.5, and 4.7. Well, what we want to do with this group of topics is to finish up Chapter 4 on our Introduction to Probability. And we talked about the addition rule in the previous section. That was one of the first two major computing rules in probability. Now we want to focus our attention on the multiplication rule. So section 4.4 is called the basics of the multiplication rule. So here we want to begin by checking out the fundamental definition of conditional probability, because that is the basis of the formal multiplication rule. By a conditional probability, that's the probability that a second event happens, knowing that a first event did happen. So often that involves sampling without replacement. Whether we sample with or without replacement determines whether or not we use conditional probability. So you want to check out some of those examples. And then related to that, we want to be able to differentiate between independent and dependent events. Events that are independent are two events in which the outcome of the first event does not influence the outcome of the second event. So we want to be able to differentiate that, and there's some nice examples of pairs of events in the exercises that can help you with that. And then we want to be able to use the formal multiplication rule in terms of applications. So make sure you check out the formal multiplication rule. That you can think of that as the multiplication rule if the events are either independent or dependent. And then in section 4.5, well, that section is pretty much a continuation of the previous section. And the focus there is on two things. First, computing conditional probability, which is really simply a recapitulation or a reformation of the multiplication rule for dependent events. So make sure you take a look at the ways we can compute conditional probability. Sometimes those applications are written in narrative form, and sometimes those are written in tabular form in terms of what are called contingency tables. So make sure you look over that. And then Triola also has some examples on computing the probability of at least one. And you can think of the computing of at least one as being computing the probability of one success or more, or the complement of no successes happening. You can think of it that way too. So make sure you look over those applications on computing the probability of at least one. And many times those involve independent events. And then in section 4.7, that finishes up this chapter. Oh, by the way, section 4.6 is on computer simulations. Great topic. You might want to read over that. That's not part of our course curriculum, so we're not going to cover that. But in section 4.7, well, that section is really on what's called combinatorics, ways we can count things up. And that's a useful technique it's been particular when we get to chapter 5 on discrete probability distributions. So first we want to look over the fundamental counting rule, and there are some nice applications there, very easy to understand and very easy to implement. And then we want to talk about computing factorials. Factorials are specific, is a new and specific mathematical operation. And by the way, if you want to compute factorials on your graphing calculator, you simply hit the math key and then go over to the probability menu. It says PRB, and if you scroll down to option 4 on your calculator, you'll see the exclamation symbol, and that is the symbol we use for factorial. So make sure you can check that out in your graphing calculator. And then the two primary ways we compute things, computing permutations and combinations. Permutations are involved when order is important. In other words, there might be a ranking involved, and there's no repetition. In other words, we sample without replacement. With combinations, Well, same sort of thing, only order is not important there. In other words, there's no ranking involved. The order in which we select things from a sample doesn't matter. That's with a combination. So make sure you look over those applications of permutations and combinations. And again, we can use our graphing calculator to help us compute those permutations and combinations easily. And then as far as working some exercises this week in section 4.4, starting on page 168 of your ebook, problems 5 through 11 odd, 17 through 21 odd, and then item 23. I set that one apart because that's a application that's kind of offset from this group that's before it. And then in section 4.5, starting on page 175 of your ebook, problems 5, 7, 11, 23, and 25. I just picked out some problems there of at least one and conditional probability I thought you might be interested in. And then finally in section 4.7, starting on page 189 of your ebook, exercises 1 through 23 odd. So that is your topics checklist for sections 4.4, 4.5, and 4.7.